Here's a tip for you. At the Mandarin Centre in Chatswood, you have to validate your parking no matter how long you're staying, because otherwise you will get a $12 bill like I just did. Anyway, welcome to Four Wheels and a Seat, the only channel on the internet where every week you can see a brand new car reviewed. That line has a big asterisk next to it because we may not actually be the only channel, but I like to think we're one of the better ones. Anyway, my name's Alex Dalrymple, and if you like what you see, make sure you hit subscribe to see a new review every week, and also hit the like button as well. That would be awesome. This week I'm back in the Kia Niro. Last month I reviewed the full electric EV version of this car, and now I'm in the hybrid version. And this hybrid behaves a little bit differently to most hybrids in that it acts a bit more like a plug-in hybrid, except that there is no plug. So it gets its charge directly from the engine and also from regenerative braking, which is adjustable, and all of those are actually a bit unusual in a regular hybrid. Kia are obviously going for a slightly more premium end of the market with this car because it actually is feeling a little bit luxe in comparison to, say, the Seltos. Here we've got lots of creature comforts, lots of gadgets, and lots of soft touch materials, which really does give this car a bit of a premium edge. I did a bit of a deep dive into the external appearance of this car when I reviewed the EV last month. They both look the same. If you want to have a look at that, make sure you check out the review by clicking the button just up here in the top right-hand corner. Under the bonnet, we've got a 1.6 litre four-cylinder turbocharged engine that's mated to an electric motor, and together they output 104 kilowatts of power and 265 newton meters of torque. And interestingly, this top-shelf GT line model is actually a little slower to 100 k's per hour than the entry-level S model. There's only about half a second in it. But that kind of does prove that this GT line model is purely a trim level and really has no bearing on performance. Fuel economy, as you'd expect from a hybrid, is really good, averaging at 4 litres per 100 kilometres on a combined cycle. Interestingly, boot space in this hybrid is actually smaller than it is in the EV, and it's a significant amount, about 50 litres. It's 425 litres, but when you put the rear seats down, the hybrid is actually bigger, coming in at 1,419. It might have something to do with the battery under the floor. This car also has a space-saver spare tyre, so I guess when you kind of factor all that in, that accounts for the difference in size. Inside, there's really nothing to tell this car apart from the EV version. They look exactly the same. So we've got the same 10.25-inch dual LED screens here that are built into the dashboard in a single unit, and it looks really, really good. The same row of shortcut buttons here on another touch-sensitive screen that cleverly alternates between shortcuts for the screen and also climate controls. A couple of USBs, USB-A and USB-C, plus a 12-volt outlet under that. Wireless phone charging, a big slab of piano black here with the rotary dial gear changer, seat heating and cooling controls, and a couple of cup holders with a nice little mechanical mechanism there, and a pretty small center console bin with a nice soft lid. In front of the driver, head-up display, we've got the same instrument cluster here that we had in the EV model. Again, there are multiple preset display modes for that, which are linked to the drive modes. However, there's 4 of those and only 2 drive modes. So unless you go through and alter them manually, there's a couple of them you're never going to get to see. The steering wheel, it's the same Kia steering wheel that we've seen in a few of their EVs and hybrids. It's a nice 2-spoke design here with the drive mode button down here in the bottom left. As I mentioned, there are only 2 drive modes in this car. We've got Eco and Sport. Eco is actually really good. It's not really a dull drive at all. It performs really, really well. It's more like most other cars' normal mode. Sport mode tends to rely less on the battery power and the electric motor and more on the petrol engine. On the steering wheel, we also have 2 paddles here, which are not to change gears, but rather to adjust the amount of regenerative braking, charging the battery from the engine. The cabin itself is also full of recycled and sustainable materials, including the seats, which are a faux leather, and they're very comfortable actually. They're heated and ventilated, which I'm really appreciating today when it is 32 degrees outside and the humidity, since I became the world's sweatiest man, is just unbearable for me. So I really enjoy getting in this car and turning on the ventilated seats, because it just cools me down so quickly. It's really, really nice in here right now, actually. There's also heated steering wheel, but I cannot think of anything worse than that right now. So the driving experience is good. I mean, like, this car has plenty of go and it's really nice to drive. It's just maybe a little bit unremarkable, maybe. It's just good, but doesn't really sort of stand out from the crowd. And that's fine for around town. You don't need anything too amazing, I guess, as a daily driver. It's pretty quiet in here. You generally can't tell when the car is switching between the electric and the petrol motor, which is really good. There's a little EV light that comes on the instrument cluster when the electric motor kicks in. Other than that, it can be kind of hard to tell, although sometimes the petrol engine, especially when it's going uphill under load, will do a whole tour of the gear range, and often it's not the correct one, so you will hear the engine making a fair bit of noise from time to time, but generally it's pretty quiet. The regenerative braking also does not work in sport mode. It only works in eco mode. And when you have it on its harshest setting, which is level 3, it does sort of make for a slightly jerky ride, because if you just ease off the accelerator, you're instantly slowing down. And in most EVs that have regenerative braking, you can kind of finesse it so that you don't really notice that jerkiness. But right now, I feel like a taxi driver who's trying to get a bit more fare out of my unwilling passenger, because you know how sometimes cab drivers would do that, not so much now, but back in the old days, they'd sit there and pump the accelerator as they were driving along under the misconception that they could charge more. Well, that's kind of what driving this car can feel like in level 3 regenerative braking. There is a bit of road noise while you're driving around, and I guess that's really mostly only noticeable because of the electric motor, and that does allow a bit more noise into the cabin. But the suspension has been tuned in Australia and it is really smooth. So the electric version of the Kia Niro is a really good compact SUV that is not exactly cheap. It's $74,000. Now, obviously this hybrid version GT line is not as expensive as that. It's about 20 grand cheaper. But that's not exactly cheap at $55,000. So if you're in the market for a compact SUV, this is a good one to consider if you're after a comfortable cruiser as a daily driver to go around town to get you from A to B. The driving experience is not amazing though, and the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross is also a very good car to drive, not nearly as well kitted out as this, but does tick a lot of the same boxes. So if you're in the market for a compact SUV, by all means check out the Kia, just know that it's perhaps not the best value for money.